So you could say that to your thinking mind, to the thinking mind, to the personality, dying into the present moment, surrendering to the present moment, is perceived like a restriction of your freedom of mobility, mind mobility. And of course, it only appears that way. The mind has it ass backwards, so naturally it would view freedom as imprisonment. Hey, my friend. I wanted to talk about the final stage of identity for a human being that is ready to become liberated from the identification with being a mind-made little me, and who is ready to die into this vast impersonal intelligence that we call the universe. Um, and so this final identification, this final identity, is usually a spiritual one, a spiritual identity, because usually you're not drawn to surrender and letting go and things like that unless things have not been going very well for you in your life. And so you've sought help. And usually you seek help through lots of spiritual books and guides, and belief systems, and all of that. And so you could say unknowingly adopt a spiritual image through that process, without even, realizing it. But ultimately, the reason why you were drawn to more spiritual, a more spiritual way of living was that you just, something started to feel off, you know, and you couldn't put your finger on it, but you needed to address it in some way. And so you enter the big spiritual marketplace. And and that can take you through all kinds of rabbit holes. Uh, but ultimately you come out of them and you come back to this place of innocence, the same place of innocence that you were in, you could say, when you first set out on the spiritual path. But this time around, you're a little bit more perplexed because you've realized that being a spiritual person is not the answer either. And so here you are again, maybe with a lot less pain, but still a little bit of confusion. And so this is a critical juncture, you could say, in the spiritual awakening process, because it's at this point where you start to realize that freedom for the mental me is not possible. That there is this thing called freedom because there's this thing called the present moment. But you can't be free in the present moment. There can just be the present moment that is free without me. And so that becomes a little bit of a tough pill to swallow uh, at some point on the path. But eventually you get over it because you have a track record now that you can look back on to see that all attempts to be a liberated person, a liberated identity, has only ever brought misery and struggle and confusion. And when that finally dawns on you, then a beautiful thing starts to happen. All of the jewels of all of the spiritual knowledge that you've absorbed up until that point start to be the only thing that's left, which tends to be the most simple insights that you've received, such as allow life to happen, don't resist, recognize that you are the present moment. You are the present moment. You don't have to be present. Recognize that you are the present moment. And so with that recognition and with those insights really starting to come into complete focus, the final stages of the awakening process start to happen pretty rapidly. It's just like if you were sliding off of a cliff face, you're at the point now where the incline is at such a pitch that gravity is now taking over and you're just along for the ride now. And this time to not try to grab onto things to prevent yourself from falling, because you have built up enough trust in this process of surrender to know that there must be a much greater intelligence at work that you're falling into, that you're going to drop into, dissolve into. I've always had a very simplistic mind, uh, never been much for complex thought patterns. And I recall when I was in college and you could say going through that dark night of the soul, um, I had realized enough that the problem was time. And so I was trying to come up with a um, a little mind habit or a mind trick to stay present as often and as frequent as possible. And I remember I ended up labeling my practice as imprisoning myself in the now, imprisoning myself in the present moment. And I use the word imprison because I knew there had to be no movement at all from this moment in every moment. And the only image that really came up that seemed to describe that was being in prison. So you could say that to your thinking mind, to the thinking mind, to the personality, dying into the present moment, surrendering to the present moment, is perceived like a restriction of your freedom of mobility, mind mobility. And of course, it only appears that way. The mind has it ass backwards, so naturally it would view freedom as imprisonment. But eventually, sticking with that little trick, other realizations came, and it was starting to be realized that, oh, this isn't about imprisonment. It's about recognizing the vastness of what you step into, the boundarylessness of what you step into when you give up leaving the present moment. And it's that type of realization, when it really starts to grab hold of you, that ends up being enough proof to just jump into the mystery, to die into it completely, to give up the spiritual identity, the spiritual image, and to become just pure awareness. And then, eventually you return back to life and, you know, continue chopping wood and carrying water and putting up a website, calling yourself Kyle the teacher. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you. I will be in touch again with the next one. Bye for now.